Disclaimer: I solemnly swear that I am not J.K. Rowling and do not own Harry Potter. Chapter 6. It took the entire weekend to fully decontaminate the drawing room. Harry was unhappy that Professor Dumbledore had left without talking to him, but he was soon too busy to think about it. By Monday morning, the only undesirable things left were a tapestry of the Black family tree and a writing desk that sounded like it was occupied by a boggart. Most of the items that looked valuable and/or dangerous were stored up in the attic for Bill to take a look at later, if he had the time. Creature fought them passively-aggressively by trying to steal back anything they tried to throw away. Nothing seemed to make the old elf more pleasant. Dobby was passive-aggressive towards him, since they disagreed so much with each other's lifestyle choices. Sirius tried to be more civil to him, but Creature just laughed at him. Creature knew he was really the one in control of that relationship, because Sirius couldn't afford to free him. And nothing in Hermione's spectrum of nice would convince him to answer a Muggle-born with anything but insults. Ultimately, Creature would need serious counseling, and they couldn't help someone who didn't want to be helped. On Monday, they took a day off to celebrate Harry's birthday. Despite the dilapidated accommodations, Harry enjoyed the party, especially having all his closest friends and his girlfriend there to celebrate with him. It was certainly an improvement on the Dursleys, with whom he had spent all of his birthdays before last year. For a time, he was even able to forget about his upcoming hearing and his bad dreams at night. Hermione didn't know much about that, but her own dreams were dark enough. For the hearing, she tried to assure him that he was perfectly within his rights to use magic in self-defense. She didn't mention her worry that the Ministry might just not care. By the day before Harry's hearing, and after many more harrowing experiences with magical pests and cursed items, 12 Grimmauld Place was fully cleaned except for the attic and Sirius's brother's old room, which he wouldn't let anyone touch. It was that day that Hermione finally got a chance to talk to Fred and George alone and find out what they were up to. They led her into their small bedroom, which was a little awkward, but she let it go, and they pulled some assorted products from under their beds. "We still have to hide this stuff from Mum," Fred explained. "Legally, she can't really do anything, but she's still Mum." "Yeah, it can be hard to stop her sometimes," George agreed. "What are you doing about money?" Hermione asked them. "Well, it wasn't easy, but we've got enough to sustain a mail-order business," George said. Fred nodded his agreement. "Yeah, order forms, catalogs, shipping, materials. Can't hire any labor. And we might be mail order for a couple of years, but we'll have our own shop eventually." Hermione thought that sounded pretty optimistic. "You do know you'll have competition, don't you?" "Of course," they said in unison. "But we've got two things going for us, though," said Fred. "First off, being mail order is actually a blessing in disguise. Gamble and Japes and Zonkos don't do delivery." "And the other thing is we've got loads of new product ideas," George finished. "We've made some of them. You want to see?" "All right, then," Hermione said. He looked around at the various products. "Well, there's this one." Hermione was surprised when he pointed to the dwarf Puffskein they had found in the drawing room, which was now in a comfortable-looking nest. "The Puffskein?" she said. "Yeah, little guy's doing better now." "Course, Puffskeins are easy to care for," Fred added. "They eat rubbish, and they rarely get sick." "A few of the Firsties will probably have them as pets," George continued. "We're going to see if they'll let us mate Serrano here and try to create a dwarf breed." Hermione's jaw dropped. "You two? Animal breeding? Seriously?" "Puffskeins are easy to breed, too," said Fred. "We'd be hip-deep in them if they were mobile enough to roam around like cats." "And you know how to breed animals?" she pressed. "You know about things like line breeding and outcrossing and humane breeding practices?" What?" "Humane breeding practices," she repeated slowly. "Muggles worry about that kind of thing. There are unscrupulous people in the Muggle world who run things called puppy mills and kitten mills, where dogs and cats are bred in unsanitary, overcrowded, and negligent conditions. And as a completely separate matter, they've also inbred some breeds so badly that they suffer serious health problems. Can you avoid all those problems doing this in a school? With limited time and resources?" The twins stared at her. It was obvious they hadn't thought of that. "We were thinking we could get Hagrid to help us," Fregrid said hesitantly. "But there's got to be some books in the library on animal breeding," George said, cheering up. "Yeah, and we could probably get some house elves if we need extra hands." Hermione rolled her eyes. "I'm pretty sure that's getting outside their mandate," she said. "Although the elves do know a lot about breeding healthy bloodlines, I'm sure they could give you some good advice." "Great idea," George said. He started taking notes on what she had said. "See, this is why we keep you around." "Excuse me, is that all?" "Just kidding, Hermione. Now these," he indicated some sweets inside an old-style metal lunch pail, "are our experimental skiving snack boxes." She raised an eyebrow at him. "Skiving snack boxes?" she said. "What do they do?" "They make you ill," Fred said thoughtlessly. "Not seriously ill, mind, just enough to get you out of class." Hermione groaned. "You shouldn't be helping people get out of class," she chided. "Hey, if that's what the market wants." She glared at him. Let's try something else. Aha!" He reached into something that looked like a slush pile of pranks and pulled out a bracelet. "Now this is a brilliant idea George came up with. It's called a daydream charm." That got Hermione's attention. She looked at the bracelet with interest. It looked like the charm bracelets that many girls wore, muggles and witches alike, except the charms were little bits of wood with runes carved on them. "It's certainly intricate," she said. "I didn't know you did much with runes." "We don't," answered George, "but we do loads of charms and enchanting, and the simpler rune stuff's not all that different. Plus there are those runes seminars Professor Babbling started giving in our third year." "Right, so this charm that makes you daydream?" Fred chuckled. "A little more than that. Say you're in a boring enjoying an afternoon in the sun, and you wonder what it'd be like to be somewhere more interesting. Like, say, having an adventure on a pirate ship with a dashing young buccaneer." George picked up the strain with a grin. Hermione blushed a little. "All you have to do is apply a simple incantation to activate the charms, and you will enter a highly realistic daydream about swashbuckling pirates that lasts for 30 minutes. "Really? That sounds like extraordinary magic. You can really do all that?" "Well, we're working on it," Fred answered. "Yeah, putting it together bit by bit," said George. "Right now it only lasts 5 minutes. And anything you say in the daydream still comes out of your mouth in the real world. Not very good for relaxing in the sun, you know. Still, you want to try it out?" Hermione's eyes widened, and she looked between them nervously. "I assume you've tested it?" she said. "Sure we have," said Fred. "We just want to see how it works for you, take some notes on how we can improve it." Hermione considered for a moment, and said, "Oh, all right then." George and Fred grinned maniacally. "Excellent," they said. Fred placed the bracelet on her wrist and drew his wand. "Now just lean back and tell us what you see. Remittere somnia." Hermione felt an odd, fuzzy feeling in her mind, and then the world changed. The new sights and sounds were clearly not reality, but close enough that it made little difference. The colors were more vibrant than in real life, while the shapes were a little fuzzy, especially in her peripheral vision. Everything had a slightly airy, dreamlike quality about it. She could hear seagulls squawking overhead and saw wooden planks beneath her feet. I'm on the deck of a ship," she said, looking more closely at her surroundings. "I still feel like I'm sitting in your room." "Yeah, we're still working on that," George replied. "Yeah, just sight and sound for now," Fred confirmed. "What else do you see?" "Well, I'm wearing a flowing red dress. My wrists are bound." "Oh?" George said. She was pretty sure it was George from his position. "I didn't know you liked those kinds of daydreams, Hermione."
"What? No!"
She could practically see him wagging his eyebrows at her.
"It's your stupid charm."
Fred countered. "We only charmed it for pirate adventure. Your mind fills in the rest."
"What? But I..."
She felt the heat rush to her cheeks. She really didn't like those kinds of daydreams, did she? But she didn't have time to contemplate that before she saw more movement in the fantasy.
Hold on, someone's coming on board.
And then she laughed because she understood exactly what was going on now.
Oh my goodness, it's the man in black!
The who? Asked George.
Also known as the dread pirate Roberts, who takes no prisoners.
Perhaps she swooned a tiny bit. Oh, so now a strapping sailor has to defend you from him?
Oh no, he's here to save me. I've been kidnapped by Vizzini to be married off to the wicked Prince Humperdinck.
What now? The twins said in unison.
It's a Muggle film, she explained. It makes sense now. The most popular pirate story in my childhood was The Princess Bride. My mind must have automatically gone there when the charm called for a pirate adventure. It's not exactly like the film, but... Ha! I am not left-handed either. Yes!
Huh?
Sorry, the man in black is dueling Inigo, and they're using all the snappy one-liners from the film.
Dueling, George said. Wands or swords? She could hear the scratch of the quill.
Swords, like in the film.
Soon Inigo was defeated, and the man in black went on to the next challenge.
Now he's wrestling Fezzik. Fezzik's much bigger, but the man in black is smarter. He's got Fezzik in a chokehold. Inconceivable!
What?
He won. Now he just has to beat Vizzini in a battle of wits. To the death!
Do you know what she's talking about, George? Nope, I'm lost. What about you, Freddy? Not a clue, but I think she's enjoying it. Indeed, Hermione was giggling at the battle of wits in the dream as it reached its inevitable conclusion.
And Vizzini says, "Never go in against a Sicilian when death is on the line," she narrated.
Okay.
There, the man in black's won. He's untying me. He's taking off his mask, and... Eep!
She felt the heat rising to her face again, and Fred, she thought, said, "Ew, looks like it just got personal from the red you're turning. Come on, Hermione, who is it?" She shook her head. She couldn't tell them. It wasn't Carrie Elwes who was under the mask. Instead, it was a strapping, idealized young man with bright red hair. "Come on, it can't be that bad," George said as the red-headed dream man leaned in for a kiss. Hermione stripped off the bracelet, partly because it would be really awkward since she couldn't feel anything, but mostly for more personal reasons.
"Sorry, I got a little more than I'd bargained for there," she mumbled, not meeting their eyes. "I'm not sure you should be selling this to under-16s. Still, this is brilliant magic. How did you do it?"
Fred and George exchanged a glance, and Fred said, "Well, we can't reveal all of our secrets. But we started with a very carefully laid confundus charm and worked our way up from there," George explained. "We made it a charm bracelet because it pretty much has to be something you wear, and that won't look suspicious to teachers. Of course, boys will have to wear them on their ankles or something. But it gets even better," Fred continued. "See this?" George pointed to one of the rune charms. "This is a power rune. The way we plan it, it'll be good for about 5 uses, and then you'll have to buy a new one from us. You can't make your own. Well, you probably could. And these," Fred pointed to the other charms, "these control what kind of daydream you have. These 3 are pirates, sword fight, and rescue. If these take off like we think they will, we'll make more charms, and you can mix and match to create your own daydreams. So if you want the pirates to fight a dragon, you just add the dragon charm from the knights fighting dragons daydream, and you're set," they finished together. Hermione's jaw dropped as her mind spun with the possibilities. They watched as she stared blankly into space. Hermione, are you okay?" George asked with concern, waving his hand in front of her face.
"You two are geniuses!"
She jumped up and hugged both of them before she caught herself and stepped back uneasily from George, turning pink. "Wow," Fred said. "You're saying that?"
"Yes. Do you realize what you're doing here? You're inventing magical virtual reality, and it works! You're ahead of the Muggles on this, and wizards are hardly ever ahead of Muggles on any kind of technology. A few more bells and whistles, some computer programming, a decent interface system, and you could create the Muggle Super Nintendo, or maybe even a holodeck. Or maybe it'll be something completely different that I can't even think of right now."
The twins stared at her again. "Okay, I think you stopped using real words about a minute ago," Fred said.
"No, I'm serious,"
she said. She tried to think of an analogy they would understand.
"Look, say you wanted to fly in the Quidditch World Cup. You'd make a charm bracelet to do that, right?"
"Uh-huh," George said.
Okay, but you don't just want to have a daydream about winning it. You want to make an actual game out of it. So you set the runes so that the other team plays at a certain skill level. Not as good as the real-life team, but good enough that it takes real skill to beat them. In fact, if the charms on the bludgers and the snitch aren't too complicated, you could add those to make them behave realistically in the daydream, and not just how the user thinks they should act."
This time it was Fred's and George's jaws that dropped. "Hermione, I could kiss you right now," Fred stammered. "Oi!" George said defensively.
"Please don't,"
she agreed. It was already complicated enough with one twin. "But seriously, we never would have thought of that in a million years!" Fred exclaimed.
"I don't think it's that big a leap," she said. "Remind me to introduce you to Muggle video games sometime. They've been doing it for years."
"It's not just the game," George corrected. "If you can make daydream bludgers behave like real bludgers, you could use it for Quidditch training."
"Oh!" she said in surprise. "Well, I don't know about that. It's a valid idea, but you won't build up any muscle that way, and I doubt you'll build up coordination as well as the real thing either."
"Oh," he said, disappointed.
"Well, still, this changes everything. We can do way more than we thought if that works."
"Might take us years to get there," Fred added.
"But it'll definitely be a bestseller."
"What have we been saying for 4 years, brother?" "Our little Hermione's been shaking things up since day one," recalled George.
"And don't you forget it,"
she said cheekily before she squeaked as they grabbed her in a four-armed hug. Hermione was awakened on the day of Harry's hearing by a loud rant from Mrs. Weasley. She missed the beginning of it, but by the time she and Ginny descended, bleary-eyed, to the kitchen, she was warmed up and saying things about the minister that Hermione was shocked to hear her say about any authority figure.
"If I get my hands on that two-faced, power-mad kangaroo of an educator—" "Mum," Ginny interrupted sleepily, "what happened?" Mrs. Weasley spun around and blushed at being overheard by her daughter. "Ginny, Hermione, I didn't hear you come in," she said. Both girls wisely didn't speak a word as to why. "Please excuse me. It's just that our esteemed minister saw fit to change the time and location of Harry's hearing. This arrived 10 minutes after he left with your father and Sirius." She held out a crumpled letter. Hermione took it and read it over with Ginny looking over her shoulder. The hearing had been moved an hour earlier, from 9 o'clock to 8. And the location was no longer in the improper use of magic office, but an actual courtroom. 8 o'clock? Hermione checked the clock. That's in 10 minutes. Is he trying to? Of course, he is trying to make Harry miss the hearing.
"He won't miss it," Remus assured them from the kitchen table. "He might be a few minutes late, which won't look good for him, but he won't miss it. It's a good thing he and Sirius went at the same time Arthur did, though. The worrying thing is that they moved it down to courtroom 10.
"What's wrong with that?" Hermione asked. "In the Muggle world, it would be pretty much automatic to have it in a courtroom."
He shook his head. "Not in the magical world. That courtroom is for trials in front of the entire Wizengamot. They only do it for really big cases. I don't think it's been used at all since the war. It means Fudge is politicizing this hearing even more than we thought."
"Let me guess," Hermione said. "Most of the Wizengamot only get their information from the Daily Prophet?"
She knew a thing or two about how the government of Magical Britain was set up. "Right in one. So Fudge has a better chance of convincing him than if it's just Amelia Bones."
"But he has no idea!" Ginny exclaimed. "Isn't there anything we can do?"
"Don't worry," Remus said. "Professor Dumbledore will be there. He anticipated Fudge might do something like this. He'll sort it out." Hermione tried to relax during the next hour or so, but she wasn't having much luck, and Ginny didn't look like she was doing any better. The law was clearly on Harry's side, but that didn't mean much when corrupt politicians got involved. What would happen if Harry was expelled? He'd lose his wand, certainly, his Holly wand that conveyed a special protection against Voldemort, and he'd be forbidden from carrying another one. He'd have to live with Sirius. Or would Dumbledore make him go back to the Dursleys for greater safety? That assuredly wouldn't end well. Could he possibly go to school overseas? Even come to Beauxbatons with her? Dumbledore had the ear of Madame Maxime. If the two of them together could convince the French ministry that Harry was wrongfully convicted, there would be a chance. Selfishly, Hermione thought she would like that, to have her best friend down there, but she was worried about the much greater chance that he would be blocked from his education at least until Voldemort showed himself, and by then it might be too late. Finally, Harry reappeared, escorted by Sirius and Mr. Weasley as he entered the kitchen. Everyone stared as he stood there with a blank look on his face.
"Well?"
Ginny demanded. "Cleared," he said, "of all charges."
"Woohoo!"
Ginny yelled. She ran over and kissed him. "I knew it!" Ron yelled. Hermione slumped in her chair with relief.
"Oh, thank goodness," she said. "I knew they didn't have a legal leg to stand on. Did they give you a lot of trouble? We found out they changed the time and location."
Fred and George started doing something that looked like a war dance to the chant of, "He got off, he got off, he got off." "Some," Harry said. "We got there about 5 minutes late. Mr. Weasley wasn't allowed in. They didn't want to let Sirius in either, but he used some legal trick to get past them." "It wasn't a trick," Sirius cut in. "I just told them they couldn't try him as an adult on an underage magic charge." Right. So it looked bad at first because I didn't have any witnesses. It turns out that Muggles can't see Dementors. And they brought up both my previous violation from Dobby, even though I'd been cleared."
"Oh, for Merlin's sake!" Hermione
groaned. Ginny had joined in the twins' chant.
"He got off, he got off, he got off." "That's enough, Fred, George, Ginny," Mrs. Weasley scolded.
"Yeah, luckily Dumbledore showed up about 3 hours early, by happy accident, and he got old Figgy as a witness," Sirius said.
"That Mrs. Fig person?"
Hermione asked. "Right. It wasn't easy, though. Fudge tried to block everything. Didn't want her to testify. Wouldn't let me answer questions," Harry added. "Didn't want to believe about the Dementors. And Dumbledore took Fudge apart 6 ways to Sunday about not following a proper procedure," Sirius finished with a grin. "I think that's what really got him off." "He got off, he got off, he got off. Come on, Hermione."
"No, thank you, Fred,"
she said as he tried to take her arm.
"My God, Harry, he completely railroaded you. That's not the kind of thing you expect to see in a first world country. Not to mention how the Dementors found you in the first place. Your relative's house was supposed to be safe. Dumbledore said so."
"Well, even the best can get like that if they turn paranoid. At least Harry got a trial," Sirius said a little sulkily. Harry more or less ignored that last bit. "I just wish Dumbledore had actually talked to me," he mumbled, "or even looked at me. Ow!" He clapped his hand to his forehead.
"What is it?"
Hermione said. "Scar, but it happens all the time now he's back." "Dumbledore's got a lot on his plate, Harry," Sirius said. "I had a talk with him for you, though. He's going to try to make some better arrangements for you." Harry gave his godfather a weak smile. "Thanks, Sirius."
"He got off, he got off." "Shut up!"
roared Mrs. Weasley. A week after Harry's hearing, everything changed for Hermione. The day started out normal enough, and she planned to wrap up one of her special projects. She asked Harry to bring the Marauder's map to look it over with Sirius and Remus, and she called Fred and George too, since they'd prank her if she didn't let them in on something like this.
"I've got nearly everything I need to create my own map of Beauxbatons when I go back next month," she said, and she unfolded her own sample map that she had made by casting detection spells over her rooms at Beauxbatons. "This is just a partial version. I haven't tied it into the wards yet, although I think I know how, and I had to freeze it before the school year ended because the detection spells don't work outside of France. Something about the National Rune Network, I think. But at least you can see what I'm doing."
Her map showed a still image of the 4th-year dorms at Beauxbatons, with dots of different colors, each with a small name written next to it.
"So I color-coded the dots," she explained. "Students who are residents of the dorms show up in black. For the whole school, I'll just make it all students in black. Teachers are blue and visitors are red."
"Colors?" Sirius said in surprise. "Moony, why didn't we think of that?" "No idea. I guess we never thought we needed it," Remus answered. We mainly used our map to hide from everybody.
I can choose to show particular groups of people for easier readability, Hermione went on.
There was a row of colored circles along the right-hand edge of the parchment. She tapped the black circle, and the black dots vanished, leaving the red and blue ones. The black circle was replaced by a black outline. She tapped it again, and the black dots reappeared.
I can zoom in.
She tapped a symbol that looked like a magnifying glass with a plus sign inside it, and the image vanished and redrew itself doubled in scale. Remus's jaw dropped. Merlin's beard! Why didn't we think of that, Padfoot? That would have made things so much easier than trying to read that tiny print.
And I can pan the image, Hermione continued.
4 arrows had appeared, one on each edge of the page. She tapped one of them, and the map vanished again and redrew itself in the new position half a page to the left. "What's that green line?" Harry asked, pointing to a dotted line that squiggled around the page.
That's me. I wanted to put in a playback function where you could go back and show where people were at an earlier time, but the map can't store very much memory. So instead, I made it so you can select a person, and it'll draw a trail on the map wherever they go.
She pointed to where the line ended at a special green dot labeled Hermione Granger. The twins' jaws dropped, too.
That would be so much easier than watching all day to see where people were,
Fred exclaimed. "Why didn't you two think of that?" George asked Sirius and Remus, who were too speechless to respond by now. Hermione grinned.
Also, I added this feature this summer,
she said. She tapped another symbol with her wand, and her label changed to Hermione Jean Granger.
It can display full names, so we don't have that junior-senior problem that Harry had last term.
Hermione, this is incredible, Remus said in awe. Just tapping your wand to the little symbols and making it do things we never even thought of. How did you do all this?
It's called a graphical user interface. It hadn't been invented yet when you made your map, but most Muggle computers use it now. It's just like how they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, interacting by using pictures is a lot easier and more efficient than using words. Your map already has most of the information it needs to do these things. It's just a matter of changing how it draws things.
Damn, Sirius said. It's a shame we sealed the Marauders' maps and no one could tamper with it. This would have been brilliant. This is a work of art, Hermione, Remus agreed. I knew you were brilliant, but somehow I never really expected you to blow right past us like this. Do you think you could make a map of Hogwarts like this? Asked George. She shook her head.
No. In principle, yes, but I'd have to get into the castle and tie into the wards. Sorry.
Still, to have one of Beauxbaton's, Remus trailed off. So, if you can do all that, what do you need our help with?
Well, the most important thing is that right now I can't get the homunculus charm to work through magical forms of concealment. I made it work for elves, ghosts, and cats by reading their magical signatures directly and adjusting the arithmetic terms to match. But I wanted to find out how you got it to work for animagi, invisibility cloaks, and polyjuice. And metamorphomagi, she added, remembering Tonks. That could be important in the future, after all.
Yes, it certainly could, Remus said. Now, hold on a minute, Moony, Remus cut him off. We've told her before we can't just tell her Marauder secrets. Yes, but these are more serious times, Padfoot, and who knows? Harry might be relying on her in the future. It's quite a conundrum. Sirius stroked his short beard, which was far less disconcerting than when Dumbledore did it. We could induct Miss Granger into the Marauders, but she doesn't have an animagus form, and her reputation as a prankster is a bit weak. All right, how about this, Hermione? We'll compromise. We'll tell you what you need to know, but we want to see if you can figure it out from the map itself first.
Oh!
Hermione blinked for a moment, trying to sort out the rambling conversation. Sirius and Remus were starting to sound a bit like George and Fred.
Well, I can try, but your map doesn't like being probed much.
Who does? Sirius said with a chuckle. But I think you can pull it off if you talk to it, right?
Oh, very well.
Hermione tapped her wand to the blank map and said,
I solemnly swear that I am up to no good.
The map appeared, and she decided to try one of the magic manipulation spells she had learnt last year.
Stratusipere.
Layers of enchantments floated up and hovered above the map. Sheets of magic in different colors, some covered in runes and others in scrawling handwriting. But before she could read any of them clearly, all of the layers clamped back down and vanished, as she suspected they would from her prior studies, and the map of Hogwarts Castle was replaced by writing. Mr. Prongs detects the use of unauthorized spell manipulation on the Marauder's map. Mr. Mooney expresses surprise that anyone would think such a laughably simple trick would work. Mr. Padfoot agrees with Mr. Mooney and requests that meddling arithmancy students quit messing with our stuff. Mr. Wormtail requests the intruder identify himself or herself and explain why they wish to access the map. Sirius grunted on seeing Wormtail's name. Can't we get him off of there? You're the one who just said we sealed the map, Remus chided. Hermione's mouth hung open for a moment as she considered how to proceed. She lifted her wand from the parchment and said, "Will it remember my previous conversation with it?" "No," Remus said. "No memory. We programmed it to recognize a few people, and that's it." "All right, then." She got an idea and tapped her wand to the parchment again. "My name is Lady Archimedes, and a wise mentor once told me, 'Never trust anything that can think for itself if you can't see where it keeps its brain.'" The ink vanished for a minute before new writing appeared. Mr. Mooney agrees with Lady Archimedes that this is indeed wise advice. Mr. Padfoot advises Lady Archimedes to be more adventurous than that if she wishes to get anywhere as a marauder. Mr. Wormtail would like to point out to his colleagues that the name Lady Archimedes is ambiguous with regard to gender, and they should be more careful not to offend him or her. Mr. Prongs bids Lady Archimedes good day, and advises him or her that Marauder's secrets are not available to the general public. Hermione grimaced at the traitor being the most considerate of the bunch, but she pressed on. "I should think that the 'lady' part of my name would be clear enough, and I've figured out a few of your secrets already." Mr. Wormtail apologizes for his earlier confusion and thanks Miss Archimedes for her clarification. Mr. Prongs approves of Miss Archimedes' use of code name, but suggests that her claim is an audacious ruse reminiscent of his own exaggerations. Mr. Padfoot agrees with Mr. Prongs and demands Miss Archimedes put her money where her mouth is. Mr. Mooney agrees with his colleagues and challenges Miss Archimedes to prove her knowledge of Marauder's secrets. Hermione's lips curled into a smirk as she rubbed her findings in the map's proverbial faces.
"The map works by tying a homunculus charm into the castle wards. You got ghosts to show up by copying their magical signature into the arithmetic expansion of the charm. You have several high-powered spells extracting information from the wards, a hidden rune layer to convert it into more useful information, and a set of simple artistic charms to draw it on the map form. From the look of things, you've talked to me with a simple interface that detects certain spells, words, and phrases spoken in the presence of a wand, and writes down pre-prepared responses. It's intent-based, so it's more flexible than writing out every possible combination. It's similar to the enchantments used to make magical portraits, but they would have to have been heavily modified to work with the written word and to stick with your formal-speaking marauders' personas."
The map went blank for a minute, as if stunned speechless. Even Sirius and Remus looked surprised by that last deduction, but it wasn't that hard. Simple computer conversation programs like Eliza had been around for years in the Muggle world. Eventually, the writing on the map reappeared. Not orderly, but jumbled together all at once, as if she'd stumped its programming and caused it to produce an error, although the words were still coherent. "Mr. Prongs admonishes Mr. Mooney for not hiding our secrets better from intruders." Mr. Mooney defends his runes and arithmancy skills and proposes that Ms. Archimedes had help learning our secrets. Mr. Wormtail points out that when one student can hide, an equally talented student can reveal, and would like to inquire as to Miss Archimedes' own runes and arithmancy skills. Mr. Padfoot demands Miss Archimedes state her intentions regarding the Marauder's map if she thinks she can investigate it so brazenly.
Hermione said. "Would they react well if I said I wanted to make a better map?"
Sirius whistled softly. "I don't know. We were pretty arrogant back then. We'd probably just challenge you to do it all yourself."
"Ah," she groaned. She considered her answer and spoke to the map again. "I've passed 4th-year runes, and I just took the Newton arithmancy as an independent study because I'm just that good." She grinned. "And I think I can help the real marauders solve their polyjuice problem."
Mr. Prongs is impressed by a boast worthy of himself. Mr. Wormtail is skeptical of Miss Archimedes' claims because of said resemblance to Mr. Prongs' antics. Mr. Padfoot is skeptical that the real marauders would allow a lady friend such intimate access to the marauder's map. Mr. Mooney would like to get to the point already and ask, "What polyjuice problem?" Hermione glared at Sirius. "What? I was 16!" he defended himself. She rolled her eyes and continued.
"The map can see through polyjuice potion, but it doesn't tell you when it's in use. A dark wizard with an unassuming name could kidnap and disguise himself as the defense professor, and you'd never know it until it was too late." Mr. Mooney inquires as to when that would ever be a problem. To Hermione's surprise, no other words seemed forthcoming. "Is it supposed to do that?"
she asked. She hoped she hadn't broken it. "You're pretty far outside what the charms were intended to do," the real Mooney answered. "I'm not surprised it started acting strange."
"Oh, well," she tapped her wand again and said sternly, "it happened this past year."
Mr. Prongs withdraws his objection to allowing Miss Archimedes access to the map on the grounds that she can clearly get in as much trouble as we can. Mr. Padfoot also withdraws his objection and inquires as to whether Miss Archimedes is dating one of the marauders. Hermione flushed pink and went straight to magenta when she glanced at Sirius. That wasn't something she wanted to think about. She flailed about for a moment, grasping for an answer, before it came to her.
"A lady doesn't kiss and tell."
The map seemingly accepted that, and continued. Mr. Wormtail sustains his objection on the grounds that this could all be an elaborate ruse.
You would, Hermione thought.
Mr. Mooney inquires as to how Miss Archimedes would solve the alleged polyjuice problem.
"Well, from what I know so far, I suspect it's a simple matter of adding an extra drawing charm to draw a different symbol when polyjuice is detected. Or any concealment, for that matter. I've already been playing with drawing charms and producing similar results. But I need to see how the homunculus charm is tied into the identification wards, and presumably hack into the arithmetic expansion for polyjuice potion to figure out how to implement it."
There was a long pause from the map, but finally the reply came. Mr. Mooney overrules Mr. Wormtail on the grounds that Miss Archimedes could probably create her own map at the rate she's going. And, just like that, runes appeared across the pages of the map and revealed its inner workings for all to see. "Whoa!" Sirius, Remus, Fred, and George all said at once. "I never thought I'd see someone just talk their way through it like that," Remus said. "Even we had trouble with it when we were making the thing." "Are you sure we can't make her a marauder?" Sirius asked. "Even the map thinks she's worthy." "Well, maybe," Remus said. "Although at this point I'm not sure she needs us." Hermione started happily analyzing the rune work on the map, now that she could see it clearly.
"Say, Ron, you want to give me a hand with this?"
Ron looked up from the Quidditch stats he was poring over. "What, me?" he said.
"Yes, you've got as much of a knack for runes as I do. Come take a look."
"Yet another swotty overachiever in the family," Fred said melodramatically. "Where did we go wrong?" George said. Ron and Hermione whacked them both in the backs of their heads. "All right, then," Ron said. "You know, I always wanted to get a look at this thing. So this stuff looks like something's feeding into it. There's a bunch of stuff. This looks like your arithmancy stuff. It's taking whatever's being fed in and doing a bunch of calculations."
"Yes, that'll be the data from the identification wards being run through the kernel to turn it into a form the user interface can use."
"Huh?" Ron said.
"Never mind. Just look for something that identifies different types of magical signatures."
"Okay," Ron muttered. Ron muttered names of runes under his breath as he scanned over the parchment. He didn't have as much technical precision, or depth of knowledge as Hermione, but he had a head for languages, and he was surprisingly adept at getting the gist of an arrangement of runes from a lazy once-over. It made him quick in a way that she wasn't. A skill honed over many years, she was sure he would claim. "There!" He pointed to a particular cluster that had several arithmetic formulae written into it. "That's taking the, data and checking for certain patterns. Don't ask me what patterns those are, though. That's your thing." Hermione mentally converted the formula to the way she had written them on her map, while Ron surveyed the rest of the runes. To her surprise, he started tapping with his wand and uncovering hidden handwriting, presumably how the messages to the reader were created.
"Okay," she muttered to herself. "So that's humans. That one is ghosts. That one, those are transfiguration equations. Holy cricket, that must be animagi."
Suddenly, Ron burst out laughing so hard that he fell over.
"Ron!" Hermione spoke over his squawking. "Ronald, what did you do? Put a laughing jinx on it?" she demanded of the alleged adults in the room.
"No," Remus said. "He must have seen."
Merlin's beard!" Ron stammered, gasping for breath. You actually charmed it to insult Snape?"
Remus and Sirius sniggered at that. "Oh, that's what he found," Sirius said. "That was a good one." Hermione shoved Ron aside and looked at what he had uncovered.
"Mr. Mooney presents his compliments to Mr. Snape, and begs him to keep his abnormally large nose out of other people's business."
Fred and George collapsed in laughter as well. Hermione didn't think it was nearly as funny, but even she found herself giggling.
"It figures," she said. "You two actually went to the trouble to charm it to insult him in particular?"
"Hey, we really couldn't stand him," Sirius defended himself. "Oi, Harry, you want to take a look?" he called across the room. "It's charmed to ask your mum on a date, too." Harry blushed red, but Hermione saved him when she said,
"Excuse me, but getting back to the point, I'm looking at these formula, and there are a bunch of arithmetic expansions of magical signatures already written in here. This is animagi, this looks like the kind of number theory you get in potions, so that should be polyjuice. I think this one is disillusionment. How do you already have all this?"
"Well, it's pretty simple. The Hogwarts Identification Awards can see through pretty much any concealment," Remus explained. "But we couldn't get the map to show what they told it without knowing what to look for. Normally the wards themselves don't do much. So many people go in and out of the castle, and so many different magics are used in there every day, that there aren't really any alarms set for anything like that, but the information was there." "Yeah, sorry to be anticlimactic, but we figured out all those forms of concealment by reading the magical signatures directly, like you did for ghosts and elves," Sirius agreed. "Animagi, polyjuice, disillusionment. Course, it was a pain in the arse to figure out Prong's invisibility cloak. Actually, how did we figure that out, Moony?" "We didn't," Remus said flatly. "It didn't behave like a regular invisibility cloak. Nothing we did could get it to show up. The thing was, its invisibility was too perfect. It left a blank spot in the wards, so in the end we identified it by the hole it left." That was odd, Hermione thought. She didn't know of any artifacts that blocked all magic like that. She wondered if Mad-Eye Moody could actually see through it, or if he saw it the same way, a blank spot to an eye that normally saw everything.
"Well, now we're getting somewhere," Hermione said, scribbling down formula. "But when did you brew polyjuice?"
Remus almost giggled when he remembered. "That was James' harebrained scheme to sneak into Lily's dorm in 6th year. Fun fact, it turns out the wards will let you in if you're transformed into a girl, but as soon as you change back, they'll throw you out the door." "Yes, Lady Ravenclaw was smarter than any lovesick teenage boy there ever was," Sirius said with an exaggerated air of resentment.
"As it should be," Hermione said primly. "Let's see, is that one Metamorphomagi?"
Sirius leaned over to see. "Yes, we got that one when I visited Little Tonks over the summer."
"And this one?" She pointed to the next line.
"Filch's cat."
"We never did understand that one," George pointed out. "Mrs. Norris is the only cat that ever shows up, and you would have never met her."
"It's not Mrs. Norris," Remus corrected conspiratorially. "It's her collar."
"Her collar?"
George and Fred said in unison. "Of course," Remus said. "It has a homing charm on it. That's how Filch always shows up where she is." All of the teens' jaws dropped, even Hermione's. "Didn't you know that?"
"No, no idea," Hermione said. "So what's this last one?"
"Peeves," Sirius and Remus said together.
"Peeves? How did you get him to sit still long enough to copy his magical signature?"
Sirius laughed. "Oh, that's a funny story. See, Mooney got the idea to copy a Muggle cartoon he saw once. Remus smirked as he told the story. We propped up a box on a stick and put a case of dung bombs under it as bait, and then we hid around the corner. When he went to grab them, we dropped the box on him. Hermione gave them a confused look.
But Peeves is a spirit. He could just phase right through the box, she said.
Yes, but Peeves is practically a cartooned character himself. He was too thick to realize he could get out until we surrounded him and got a good reading. Of course, once he did realize he could get out, he blew up the entire case of dung bombs in our faces, Sirius added with a grin. Oh, we paid for that one.
Well, Hermione said, giggling again, I think that's all I need to finish my own map. Thank you so much. You know, I'd like to be able to mark possessed people on the map, too. We could have used that feature our first year, but I don't think I'll get the chance. Pop! Eep! Hermione jumped when a very flustered-looking house elf appeared in the middle of the room. Dobby, what's happening? Is something wrong? Please be pardoning Dobby, Miss Hermione, he said. Your parents is being very upset. They is wanting you to read these. Dobby handed over 3 letters, which she took with a confused expression. Her confusion only grew when she read the first one. Dear Hermione, we need you to come home right away. These letters arrived for you at home on Tuesday. We assume it's because of those magical protections where you're staying that they came here instead of going straight to you, but we're sending them with Dobby, since regular post owls can't get to you. Needless to say, we are proud of you about the first one, but we are not happy about the second, and we want answers. We'll discuss this when you get home. Love from Mum and Dad.
That's strange, Remus said. I wonder what's so urgent.
I don't know. I don't know why I'd be receiving letters over the summer. I told everyone I'd write to that I'd be out of contact.
She opened the second letter and read it.
Dear Miss Granger, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as the co-winner of Transfiguration Today's Most Promising Newcomer Award, alongside Rebecca Gamp, for your work on discovering the 6th exemption to Gamp's Law of Elemental Transfiguration. This is truly extraordinary work and is most worthy of recognition. We invite you to attend an awards ceremony at noon on the 26th of August at our headquarters at 42 Bagshot Row in Hogsmeade. Kindest regards, Circe Cesena, lead editor, Transfiguration Today.
Transfiguration Today? Said Fred. That's amazing, George finished. That's truly extraordinary, Hermione, Remus said. Professor McGonagall won that award when she finished school. Yeah, but Mad-Eye will have a field day checking them for funny business, Sirius teased. Hermione was indeed pleased, but she was still concerned. Mom and Dad had said there was a problem with the last letter. Nervously, she unfolded it and read. Then the color drained from her face, and she stood still, silent and shaking. Hermione, Ron said worriedly. She didn't respond. Hermione, what is it? George said. Hermione let the letter fall to the table so they could see.
Dear Miss Granger, we are writing to inform you of recent changes to the Ministry of Magic's education standards that will affect your future schooling. As of the 7th of August, 1995, Educational Decree Number 21 is in effect, which reads in part, all students from the ages of 11 to 17 residing in the British Isles must be enrolled in a program of magical education within the British Isles that conforms to a ministry-approved curriculum. Your current enrollment at Beauxbatons Academy of Magic in France does not fulfill the ministry's education requirement to be educated in Britain. Furthermore, its lack of fifth-year qualifying examinations classifies Beauxbatons' program as a substandard magical education under the new standards and would disqualify it from receiving an exemption. As such, you are required to enroll in Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry in Scotland, or a ministry-approved tutoring program, before the 1st of September. Hoping you are well, Elidora Dewey, Department of Magical Education.